All right, welcome back to the RETCON 2021 Build Summit. I hope you're having an awesome time so far. Our next panel is the future of BIM, how modeling can revolutionize your developments. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. And Erin, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks so much for the introduction, Patrika. I'm excited to be here and talk about BIM with my fellow panelists. To start off with some quick introductions, my name is Erin Kahn. I'm a Construction Solutions Director with Suffolk Construction. We're a national GC headquartered out of Boston. In each of our major offices, we have construction labs, or collabs for short. So I run our Los Angeles collab and cover our LA and San Diego teams in terms of process innovation, technology, and implementation. So let's pass off the next introduction to Josh. Take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Erin. My name is Josh Peters. I'm a Senior Vice President for Bozzuto Construction Company. Bozzuto Construction Company is part of the larger Bozzuto Group, which is a privately held, diversified real estate company that has 4 groups: development, construction, management, and homes. I've been with Bozzuto for approximately 11 years, and for the majority of that time, I was in operations, ran all construction in the state of Maryland, but now I oversee pre-construction estimating. And over the last 2 years, we started up our business solutions group and virtual design and construction group, which I also oversee. And right now our company is in a real boom geographically and size. We do about 450 to 500 million a year, and we're expanding into Delaware and also Boston.
Excellent. So next up, let's go to Gary.
Good afternoon. I'm Gary Ball. I'm Senior Vice President with Madison Marquette. Madison Marquette's a national realty services company that owns and operates predominantly retail facilities throughout the country, pretty much all 4 corners of the country. My job as construction executive is predominantly in the Mid-Atlantic region, although I do assist throughout the country on projects as needed. Thank you.
Okay, great. And last but not least, Clay, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Clay Landers. I'm Chief Construction Officer for Cortland. We're a scaled multifamily group, most major markets in the US, one of the largest providers currently. We have a pretty big appetite for innovation and design, and so BIM is an exciting sort of topic and future for us. So happy to be here.
Excellent. So we are all in good company today for a discussion on BIM. So I'll kick off with our first question. And at Suffolk, BIM is essential to our projects. And as BIM becomes more integrated into project delivery, just in general in our industries, what role do each of you see it playing in cost savings?
Sure. So for us, we have a pretty large variety of design products that we receive and are asked to execute. So anytime that BIM is utilized, we get a better product. We get something more thoughtful, more coordinated. Our team just spends much less time chasing design solutions and more time on buyout and production and quality where we want them. And that begets savings. We spend less time on change orders and all the things that a looser design product can give us. We also spend a lot of time in the 4D use of BIM, really leveling in a schedule so that we can plan the product with our users. We get a better context of when and how we're going to use the space, deliver the spaces. So I believe that removes a lot of would-be uncertainty on that front end. So that again begets real cost savings.
Yeah, the removal of uncertainty is key because you're essentially creating a more predictable outcome by having the model to coordinate. So any other thoughts? Josh?
It's similar that you said that predictability for us, we are just getting into, I'd say for about the last 5 years, we started doing it. We started off as a garden style apartment builder. And as I said in kind of my intro, we're fast growing into the mixed use. And as all of us know, we're kind of the last adopters of BIM right now for wood frame, especially because you can cut a 2x4 and stick a HVAC duct in there and just send a little fix over to the structural engineer to get that approved. But you can't do that obviously with a post-tension concrete slab. So we found that early coordination has really allowed us to eliminate some of those unforeseen conditions and that unforeseen risk that we have. And so obviously, just like Clay said, it ties directly to schedule and cost for us, and potentially even being more competitive in our GMP pricing, because maybe we're willing to reduce contingency because we know that we've been doing coordination early, that we know that there's a little more buy-in from the subcontractors that have been doing that design assist or even design build process with us through the BIM model.
Yeah, that buy-in process is definitely key as well. Earlier, the coordination, less questions later on, so less RFIs typically, right?
And
so
I'll add to that. I'll
yeah.
add to that as well, because I've been in the BIM environment now for about 13 years. First, as a general contractor, I worked in the on the general contractor side for about 30 years, and had the pleasure of working with some folks that were very early adopters of BIM, and actually lean coordination or lean construction is part of that process. And just found it to be probably what I'll call the best hammer we've ever had relative to fitting the components together. Just gave you much, much more certainty in terms of that process. And initially it was just on the contractor side. It's only more recently moved into really being fully adopted on the design side, at least from my perspective. We've done both phases down here at the wharf, which is overall a 3 million square foot development. First phase of actually 3.3 million square feet. The first phase of 2.3 million was design build, and that was all done in the BIM environment. And it really afforded the team the opportunity to move aggressively through the schedule with much greater certainty, as was covered by both Clay and Josh earlier. It really helps eliminate a lot of the issues that you run into. It's not that you won't still run into issues, but a lot of them are just off to the side, and they're readily resolved in clash detection as you go through the process, particularly on the MEP side. Really appreciate the fact that we have BIM now, versus the old light tables.
Definitely agree. So as a follow-up, what are the biggest areas of opportunity for future applications of BIM?
I would step in, Clay. I'm going to step on your toes a little bit and follow up with what you said. There was the 4D scheduling side. We're just getting into it, and we did one on we have a $120 million project. Actually, I think it's a $140 million project right in Chevy Chase, Maryland. And when we were doing pre-construction, I asked the team to pull together the schedule, and we had a BIM model, and we actually ran a 4D scheduling BIM model. So it's the rendering as it goes up tied to the timeline of the schedule. And sure, it went up 3rd, 4th, 5th, roof, 6th, 7th, 8th. And we're like, wait a second, you guys got the roof in the wrong spot. So I think for us, that opportunity of being able to tie 4D, even 5D cost loading schedule, being able to see, truly visualize what the building is doing during those time frames has been great for us to catch some issues early that we can get resolved, like just tying tasks properly on a schedule that maybe has 2,000, 3,000 line items on it.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll jump in here as well with future applications of BIM, or rather, some current applications. So if you have a 3D model, what's also possible is using that coordinated model for a virtual reality experience. So one of the cool things I guess I see in my role being in the construction lab is being able to take a BIM model in whatever format and putting it into this immersive experience where you can walk through your design and go back and change things before you go and build it, right? So that also ties into that cost savings piece.
Exactly.
Any other thoughts from the group on future applications?
Yeah, so We have spent quite a bit of time in R&D on offsite construction and modular construction. And as you might know, the only way for that to be successfully utilized is by the designers up front adopting it and designing from that end use or that end delivery method. So I just happen to believe that more panelization, more of those systems are going to mature, and Revit and BIM are perfectly suited to manage that. In the UK, where we do some work, about 10% of construction is delivered offsite. In the US, it's about 4%. So I just think there's going to be a rapid ascension, and I think there's just going to be a heavy BIM usage to manage how to deliver that type of construction.
I absolutely agree with Clay on that. That's going to be a big piece of how BIM is utilized. But I really think the biggest area of opportunity at this point in time is expanding how BIM is used in design and whichever software package that the architects and engineers use. They haven't fully integrated the process yet, from my experience. And then, although they're designing in BIM, they're not necessarily utilizing all of the features of it, which then leaves it up to downstream contractors, to fill in the gaps of the information that they haven't put in there. That's, as that develops further, it's going to afford us much more flexibility in product types. The selections that we do is there, again, getting into the visualization that you were talking about, being able to walk through a modeled building and look at different opportunities for changing your product types before you get to mock-ups. I think you can really do that, most of that, in the visualization versus having a hard mock-up done in the field, which takes more time and costs a lot more money. But just the cost savings, efficiency, and ultimately the schedule savings that we potentially can gather from that process are going to be enormous, let alone the offsite fabrication that we'll be talking about, I think, a little bit further here as well.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that efficiency perspective. Of course, executing a coordinated BIM process on a project takes some effort, and there are some really good reasons why we want to put in that effort. Where do each of you see the most opportunities for efficiency in the design build process with using BIM?
I can go just because I keep just jumping on everybody's coattails. You were talking about virtual reality and augmented reality. For us, one of the biggest inefficiencies are basically unit finishes. Since we are an apartment builder, we need the amenity spaces in the apartments to basically be ready to rock and roll with the latest trends and with the best finishes that we can afford. And more times than not, the process of just getting that owner approval takes such a long period of time and is so delayed. And we're right now working on a job up in Boston where, similar to what you were saying, Erin, we're taking the BIM model and doing augmented reality, virtual reality, throwing on a pair of goggles, and with a click of a button, able to just change whether it's cabinets or whether it's granite and cabinet combinations, et cetera, so that ownership there can really get a sense and get a little closer to maybe a selection. They might not make the actual selection, but at least we're narrowing it down and being able to kind of get that that product moving forward in production. So the efficiency for us is obviously getting that ordered, getting that product in line and teed up so that we actually know, okay, these are the 5 last answers we need from you for finishes by using that augmented and virtual reality BIM model.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. Clay, any thoughts on efficiencies in the BIM process?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest opportunities is getting your supply chain to the table sooner. I think today a lot of key tradesmen, sort of show up and participate, but the more and more that your supply chain suppliers provide, their detailed information, dimensions, and workable drawings pulled down into Revit, into your drawing progressively, versus all of that stuff getting figured out later, is just a huge opportunity. We're also studying the 5D application, which is the step further of trying to layer your cost management into your schedule management, and just the opportunities to immediately generate draws that are accurate from what's really in place out in the field. It reduces the risk of all the financial partners. Having foresight into the lead times for your materials and how those POs are placed and managed to your project versus manual processes. So there's just a lot of places it can go and will go. But it's just slow to adopt. Our industry just happens to do that. So it's going to take some time to get there.
Yeah. It's a really great tool, but that adoption piece is critical. And speaking of some of the challenges with adopting BIM, BIM is not as prevalent in multifamily as it is in other property types. So what benefits specifically has it had on your projects?
Well, specifically for us, I think the front end coordination has just been the biggest bang so far. We have struggled to get to true federated models. Our sophistication of our design teams is just struggled to get there. We've progressively raised the expectations and descriptions of what we want from them. And we're getting closer. So there's progress being made, but we're not seeing really the full benefit. Clash detection is improved. Some of the obvious things that you might not know until you're in the field you are seeing sooner. Our pre-con team is significantly better and faster at getting quality takeoffs produced that we trust to circulate sooner. So seeing some very practical things today. The potential is still what you're trying to solve to.
Claire, can I ask a question to Clay? Sorry, make this a little more conversational. Claire, are you seeing a change where the design team, if it is more of a design assist and maybe not a true design build, but the design team is more willing to kind of meet you in the middle? What we're struggling with sometimes is that the design team isn't willing or wanting us to do estimates and takeoffs on their BIM model because the BIM model is not completely done. So when we're trying to use all the technology we have, basically it gets to a point where my virtual design and construction team has to finish the model so that we can do takeoffs to get rough budgets. Are you seeing progression in kind of that, almost like Gary said, that lean design approach where we're all kind of sitting together at the table and saying, okay, let's have that unified approach to solving for the model getting done?
Yeah, so we as a firm made this commitment 10 years ago. We said, we see the value, we want to be proficient users of this. We happen to be very vertical, so have an in-house design team is predominantly interior design, but we do have some actual architects that manage our process for us. And we have a true BIM team. We have a group that engineers our processes and our controls. And that just takes a while to get right. And then once you get that where you want it, you got to go find the designer that's up for, using it at some competitive number that you want to use. And that has led to multifamily designers pulling in commercial, trade designers. And that adds some sophistication to what you would normally design to. So you have to pull a lot of that back. But nonetheless, designers are interested in it and want to do it. But somebody on your side has to be committed and want to design a project this way and manage the output. As you say, you have to work with what you get until you get something fully federated.
Now, on my end, I've not done a multifamily that has not been in BIM. So I've not experienced what you guys have dealt with. Of course, these have all been high-rise, mid-rise, concrete structures. But the biggest challenge there has been that the design teams aren't necessarily as adept at using the BIM software because it's been newer to them. So there again, we're having to step back a bit and make sure that everything's properly coordinated. But it sounds like it's moving well into the wood frame construction as well, which I think everybody here will benefit from.
Gary, I'm sorry, Erin, one more question. Gary,
Go ahead.
for yours, when you're saying that the design team is not getting caught up and ultimately the plans aren't fully federated set of plans, who then falls into taking on the task of actually getting to that? Do you push it on as a developer? Do you push it on to the design team, to the contractor, or kind of a team approach? Everybody has to kind of divide.
Generally time requires that it goes to the contractors. I mean, fortunately, in most cases, the concrete subcontractors we've been using also do their work in BIM now. So slab head coordination, embed coordination, all of that's being done in the model. And it's been just awesome relative to both their speed of delivery as well as the lack of issues that we have downstream. Where we're finding problems is the mechanical electrical coordination within the BIM model. As we receive it and give it to the contractors, it may look like it works, but they haven't put all the parameters in there relative to clearances, putting insulation on pipes, stuff like that, which once you do that, then you run into all of these issues that we collectively have been dealing with in the field. And that's that next level that they need to get to is having all of that information also in their BIM model.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think one of the themes I'm hearing is that this is a slowly emerging standard that we're kind of pushing to, is using this model as like a centralized way to coordinate across multiple parties. But each party may be at a different stage on their level of expertise or involvement. But I know I'm excited to see over the next 5, 10, 20, however many years, the way the model gets incorporated into the problem solving process. So next up for some of the questions for you guys, how can BIM be used to catalog products? So in our models, you can, in theory, import whatever family or object types that you want. So how do you see, this tool being used to catalog products now and in the future?
Yeah, so I think I heard Josh describe pulling down virtual products, in his visualizations, we were speaking to. Our group has a supply chain for all of our finished goods. We decided very early on that there was an opportunity to go manufacture what we wanted from drywall in versus rely on the supply chain, which at the time didn't give us the quality we were after, for the price point we saw. So we do manufacture north of 40,000 SKUs currently overseas that our designers produce and manage the logistics to the sites, et cetera. But our design team has a fully developed inventor level, library. So as they develop interiors, they're pulling from literal products that are available. They have access to what our delivered pricing is. So it's been a game changer for us in just coordinating and accelerating how much faster we can understand what that finished product is.
And Clay, as a follow-up to that, so how do you see certain product types being scaled through having that library in your model?
So scale, suggests that having access to more designers, for example, if your menu happens to be available and able to be used by more designers, then by default, you're going to see some greater throughput. So I think that's the opportunity. And I think the supply chain that doesn't step up and do this, I think they lose that gain, and certainly that accelerates over time. So I just think it's going to force, once adopted, suppliers just to get there, whether it's a finished good or a building product or, just whatever they carry.
We're seeing some of our suppliers, and let me step back and say, Clay, I think that model is what we are also considering, but at a much smaller scale, of seeing if there is an opportunity to kind of be cradle to grave and look at maybe some products where it would make better sense for us to control that from design all the way through delivery. But I doubt we'll get into plumbing fixtures. And I was going to use, Kohler as an example, who we put a lot of Kohler products in, obviously, and they came to us and said they will 3D model every single one of our bathrooms on our projects that are using Kohler products. So Kohler is even taking it and saying, okay, your plumber may not have the full capabilities, but we'll work with them and do all of your bathrooms. And then there'll be that BIM model that can be, pushed over to our BIM model. So I think some manufacturers are trying to find a way to be to maintain relevancy in this industry as we are progressing so quickly. And I think Kohler is a good example of one of them where, potentially that is where that catalog of products could be so wide and spread to multiple contractors versus, I'm seeing other designers who have actually done, call it assembly types, and they literally won't allow us to use their assembly types because they're saying it's proprietary data, their assembly types. And so we're kind of in this back and forth sometimes and saying, well, hold on, we need that so we can get the information to do our estimates or our bids.
Yeah, that is really interesting to hear the perspective of the manufacturer coming into the process, especially, with the 3D approach. So that's really cool.
And I would like to insert, I think the one thing on the ownership side of the house that we're missing, and I've talked to some contractors relative to this, is the operations and maintenance component. It's there, it resides there and can be readily used in the BIM model, or may need some enhancement, but particularly on the commercial side, we're just not using that. And this is nationwide. I mean, there's probably some instances where it is. I do understand institutionally and on the federal side that they're requiring that in many cases be part of the BIM model environment. But that's, as you get into cataloging these products and you get into scale, where you're scaling up certain products across your inventory of properties, having that capability will be a sea change for us, I think, on the ownership side, to optimize our operations and maintenance dollars.
Yeah, I'll jump in and put on my developer and also apartment manager hat, since that's what our company also does. We on in-house construction deals, so where we are the developer, contractor, and also apartment manager, we have tried our hardest to get the design teams to get that level 400 and even higher design, so that we can actually do exactly what Carrie's talking about and have all the data that exists in there, so we can have maintenance records, et cetera. And it's been a struggle. It's been really hard to get these, apartment builders generally that are saying, well, it's not something that we've ever done in the past, and we'd have to hire consultants, and it's going to cost X, Y, however many tens of thousands to get them to do it. So that's one of the reasons why we did create our virtual design and construction group in order to, we now have 3 people working there. It's only been 2 years that we've had the group, because of exactly what Gary's getting at. We want to say, okay, how can we drive the process to elevate that design so that we can hand a package over to the management company and hopefully wipe our hands and go to the next one and build the next project, versus having to go back and talk about warranty and maintenance on a air handling unit, for instance.
Yeah, that is another really big, exciting component of BIM as well, is how do we centralize all the data so that it's this single source of truth in a way. And eventually, who knows, maybe this is a 3D asset that's eventually connected to things like IoT devices. So when you go to do that O&M maintenance on your building or your equipment, you're getting things like auto alerts from this intelligent model. So a lot of exciting developments can come out of that. So switching gears a little bit, we talked about multifamily. So now talking about renovation projects in particular, it's not ground up. I myself have been on 2 renos, really interesting experience. So what are your perspectives on renovation projects and how BIM is implemented? What is the value add there?
Well, I'll jump in on that one, at least to start. We're in the beginning throes of starting a large 4.2 million square foot redevelopment of some land up at the old Soldiers Home here in Washington, D.C. And a large part of that consists of historic properties that we need to integrate into our design or our component of the site. And as part of that process, what we will be doing is using drones and ground-based laser scanning to scan in the buildings so that we can develop point clouds and get accurate three-dimensional figures of each of the, I think there's 13 buildings that we need to scan in, both of the inside and to a degree, well, to a large degree, the outside, but also to a degree, the inside, particularly some of the larger features. And if you're working in BIM, then you can pull these point clouds in and you have accurate representation, finite elements, depending on what level of detail you take it to. And from a renovation standpoint, that just saves you an enormous amount of time of field surveying and determining what the elements are out in the field, which speeds the entire process up, and it gives you greater certainty as you go in and redevelop these properties. So I see that as a key element of where things have changed on particularly redevelopment or renovation projects.
Gary, did you run into any problems with, or are you going to run into any problems with flying drones down near DC? Or are you far enough away? An issue?
In that particular area, we believe we'll be fine. It is a DoD property, but we're far enough away that we're fairly certain that we're going to be able to do that. We've actually been able to do it here briefly from time to time at the Washington Channel, which is in the Pentagon's flight zone. But that's besides.
I mean,
we need special permission for that.
We're similar, everything, ditto what Gary said, 3D scanning. We bought a scanner and we have our virtual design construction group doing scanning. We have a project in Washington, D.C., a renovation, $9 million renovation project where we basically took everything on the inside out, kept the facade up, and, it's a 4-story, 5-story historic brick facade. And within 2 days, our group had the entire building and surroundings scanned down to an 1/8 of an inch accuracy. So when we're doing piles and making noise and potential vibration disruption, we already have a scan of neighbors' buildings and can say, no, that crack was already there. Look, that was not us. So that aspect of it, I think, has really been a value add. Like everything that Gary said is what we're doing and trying to do. The drones is on my list for this fiscal year, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, now I'll tag on. Our platform happens to be potentially the biggest renovation platform that I'm aware of. We've done about 50,000 apartments over the last 10 years in-house and had to scale quickly. So the quality of the deliverable we get from our design team because of scanning and BIM and Revit today versus that progression is just so much better and more reliable for our team to go try to execute to. So just the value to us is immense. Beyond the catalogs we talked about and all the efficiencies, it just really the quality of what we're starting from is really, really a powerful betterment.
Yeah, agree with all the thoughts that were shared. In my experience, it helps so much with having less surprises. In renos, I think you sometimes come across these conditions where you are not indicated on the plans, or maybe it's a historic building where you can't read the plans anymore because it's hand drawn. So getting that scan early definitely helps with a lot of different parts when it comes to renovation projects.
Well, Erin, if you go back over 100 years, there's no dimensions on those drawings anyway.
Yeah, well, you can dig in there. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the scan to BIM is an excellent tool to overcome that gap. So next up, we've kind of touched on it through a couple different pieces of the conversation, but there's a lot of effort involved, coordination, training. We've talked about creating our own groups, VDC groups. What is needed to convince more people to do this whole BIM thing? How do you sell someone on adopting it? and going that extra length to get trained up and implement and execute.
Well, I think the industry is going to force it to some degree. I just believe, you know, in the broader industry, that the stories from even our speakers today and the organizations that see the benefits, that just sort of permeates. So I just think adoption will occur. Our industry in multifamily is slower than others. And typically you need to see a financial incentive. You need to say this improves the, you know, my end of the day value that I'm taking to market. And so far that's hard to evidence. That's hard to really say I got a better sales value from this means and methods than not. So that's the trick in our space. But I do believe there are enough working examples, there are enough documents being circulated in Revit that I think your average, you know, group is going to desire that product versus what they work from without it. So I'm optimistic that, you know, that churn just continues.
We found on, again, kind of following up everything that Clay said, similar, having kind of that executive buy-in and it waterfalling down for our construction group. But really what has, and it's taken a while for this to happen, but what we're realizing for implementation and adopting in trying to get everybody down to the field teams to use it is the why and what's in it for me. So if we can sell them on the what's in it for them. And so we used Procore for all of our projects, and they had their BIM 360 add-in that you can use a BIM model. And so our superintendents already had iPads. Well, now we're walking out literally holding the model up and showing them, well, look, you're missing a penetration there, ductwork there. And for them, that was now I see why we really want to be doing the coordination early and managing this entire early upfront pre-construction process for the BIM model. And so that really, once we had that, it's been just a waterfall of positive towards using a BIM model. And then hopefully that adoption, you know, slowly or maybe quickly starts to come along for the rest of the team members.
Yeah, I agree. I'm familiar with that Procore BIM 360 iPad combo, which is really great to pushing, you know, the technology out to the field and getting the execution at the end of the day. So it's just another level of QC, which is exciting to have, you know, the power of the model just right in your hands, ready to go.
If I can add to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
From our perspective, particularly on the large scale projects, it's not an option. The design will be done in a BIM software package. You know, it just, from everything that we've experienced, you know, here at the Wharf and other projects, stepping back and not doing that would be, I just couldn't imagine at this point in time going there. Yeah, one of the things we didn't touch on is also robotics, which is going to be more and more part of what we see in construction. We are way behind all of the other major industries in the U.S. Relative to efficiency. You know, we haven't improved our efficiency much over the last 40 or 50 years. We do some prefabrication offsite, that's going to increase, and we're going to see more and more robotics come into play on construction sites. I think it's imperative that we be designing in 3D software packages.
Yeah, completely agree. The 3D component is almost like a precedent or precursor to taking the construction industry and getting it to a point where it's more of a manufacturability state where we can produce quickly and easily things off of maybe fabricating off of a model or using, you know, intelligent scanning to get better results at the end of the day.
For us, we haven't found it more of the offsite and even using a 3D model to do whether it's modular or whether it's assembly production, again, offsite. We haven't found the price competitiveness considering we don't self-perform anything. You know, we are a true general contractor. It's interesting that we'll see how over time, and again, over hopefully a shorter period of time, that maybe those prices and those efficiencies in the overall production will be reduced. But it's still, even when you take into consideration, you know, in Washington, D.C., for instance, if it's a publicly funded building, there's a lot of labor restrictions that you have to have local hiring if whatever's built on site. So one way to basically kind of offset that cost is allowing you to then build potentially modular offsite and bring it on. And even with that being incorporated, we haven't seen that. It's not even apples to apples yet. It's still more expensive. And so owners aren't willing, our ownership, when we present that option, they're not willing to pay a premium for the modular, even if we do reduce the schedule by, you know, a couple weeks or months. So it'll be interesting to see how, for us, how that changes over time. And I would agree with Gary, we have to. Gosh, I think you could jump in a time machine 7,500 years ago, you know, still hammer and saw. You know, I mean, we're still using the same tools. And I would agree with you, Gary. It has to be a must, and having developers like yourself that are mandating it is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, agree. Definitely see it as a new standard coming up here. So when we talk about BIM, it's typically around these 3D softwares. And when we take a closer look at those, there are so many on the market: Revit, Rhino, Navisworks, SketchUp, you name it. How do you go about selecting the right tools for your team and for a specific project? So for our audience out there, if you are just trying to dive into this whole VDC thing, how do you know what to get?
Clay, you want to run with that?
Sure. So our approach is always sort of design what you're really going to use it for, and don't expect to use that solution for more than 6 months, because the rate of change and the bolt-ons and the ease of navigating those is growing so quickly that I don't think you're really committing to a big mature software today like you once might. So, you know, if you're sophisticated enough to have, you know, an IT department that really wants to invest some innovation and continue some R&D time in the space, that's valuable. But again, don't expect to be in a stagnant environment for very long. And we are a group that's looked at it, you know, progressively, and I can just tell you that the number of times we've moved around is significant. So that's where I would start. Now, if you need to go to an external expert to help you navigate which bolt-on to start with what element and use you want to start with, fine. But really knowing what you're going to use over periods of time is important.
Yeah, for us, we you know, we have our virtual design and construction group, and then we have our business solutions group, and that group is truly looking at all the different opportunities for new initiatives, technology initiatives. And we found very quickly that there are a lot of really cool, pretty, shiny new toys that are out there, and that we all want to play with them just like it's Christmas morning. But in reality, if we let our teams just, yeah, go try that and go try that, without setting up a true process and backing it all the way up to what are we solving for, and then getting to that kind of end step. And so we actually created kind of a 7-step process where, hey, let's discover the problem, let's define it, then let's research what's out there, select and test it, pilot it, deploy it, and then, of course, the hardest one, which is iteration, just always working on the kinks and all of the items. So I think by us having more of a defined process, we were able to then say, okay, these are the right software for the BIM, whatever, you know, part of the model we are working on, whether it is using one of them like SketchUp for a quick model, or getting into the more detail for the really nice renderings. But even with that said, I mean, I think we're using 17 different software right now within our virtual design and construction group at different stages. And it's just like Clay said, there's a new one coming out every 6 months, and we're like, oh, should we look at that? And so we're always having to kind of pump the brakes and say, okay, what is it that we're trying to solve for here? Let's go back through the process.
Yeah, I completely agree with keeping that perspective on, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and having that as kind of your guide through the selection process. And it is, Clay, to your point, I really resonated with what you're saying with how fast the technology changes. It's kind of crazy. The next day you wake up and there's a whole nother way of executing work, which in a way is kind of exciting. So it's really pushing the boundaries of how we go about building. So we have about 5 minutes left. Just kind of wanted to wrap with some thoughts about BIM and 3D execution in general. So what are you guys most excited to see in the future, and where do you think this is going? And I can start if you need to collect some thoughts. I know that's a big question. One thing I'm really excited for, BIM 3D modeling as it is today isn't quite a digital twin. One thing I'm really hoping for in the future is getting to a place where we have a true replica of our building. So earlier on, I mentioned, integrating IoT, Internet of Things, being able to have a smart system that has all the data centrally managed with real-time updates of what's actually happening as a replica of your living, breathing building. So that is something that I'm really excited to look forward to. Hopefully one day that comes into being and we have this really great central source of truth to manage digitally. So I'll pass it off to Clay if you have your thought ready.
Yeah, so I have an expanded optimism sort of perspective that I bring to everything. So, I think about the unicorn that says, my project from conception to fully operating, an asset was fully managed through some controlled smart solution. I've seen it managed in a fragmented way for so long and felt the downside of each of those inefficiencies. So I just really appreciate where the industry can go and how they can finally integrate from a distance. COVID has woken us up more and more that people are going to be collaborating, more and more from different spaces. So if that net gets widened and it includes all the project participants, you got to have a central organized platform to do it versus traditional means. And this is that, this is sort of the best concept we've got going, and there's a lot of energy being poured into it. So it's just going to continue to mature. And we are just adamant believers and have invested a lot into it, and we're going to continue to do so. And I just suspect the industry just falls right in line.
I think for me, I was joking and I gave a little background earlier. Gary and I have worked together previously. My first job out of college 23 years ago, Gary and I worked together at that company. I was a general contractor. And my fifth year thesis in college, I presented on technology and construction. And there's still stuff from that presentation that we're not doing in residential. I'm finally seeing the progress. And I think with the 4 groups that are represented on the call right now, I think with leaders in the industry like ourselves that are pushing our subcontractors and our teams and saying, hey, we all want to be relevant 10 years from now. And the best way to do that is to jump on board. So let's get all of these technologies or these opportunities to make us more efficient. And I think that really bringing along some of our bigger subcontractors recently over the last 3 years, our MEPs, Gary mentioned concrete subcontractors, et cetera, has been eye-opening for them also. And I think that is just contagious. I think that, yes, there's hurdles we have to get over, but the excitement of how this is going to benefit all of us, I think could just lead into so many other great opportunities for the construction industry.
I absolutely agree with you, Josh and Clay. One of the, beyond the integration of the software platform across basically the entire realm of design through construction. We really get into, and Josh touched on it earlier, is that decision-making process. The thousands of decisions that the developer or developer team has to make, and how do we do those faster? As we speed up the process for design, typically we become the ones that slow it down, or we get to a certain level and then we change, how that design is going to evolve. How do we control that process so that we're able to integrate into that and really achieve that speed? And I think the software itself will allow for that if we fully integrate it into our thought process and understand that those decisions have to be made in much quicker timeframes than what we're accustomed to. That's a sea change, I think, for a number of people as well on the development side. But when you can start doing these virtual walkthroughs early on in the process and making those selections, or at least narrowing that down, that's going to speed that up. But really understanding, again, that everything that we're doing right now is evolving, and it's going to continue to evolve. It's hard to say where this will stop, but or if it ever will. But the reality is we're also going to start seeing, and we are seeing now, I think, material changes that are driven in part by the software. Because of the fact that there's more certainty in design. You think about the old steel design, old concrete designs, how much those have changed. But the other materials that are being introduced into the process, things are rapidly changing on just the material side as well. It's pretty exciting to see. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, Gary, I love that thought. BIM as the evolution of the process, but also as the facilitator for the next evolution of how we build. So with that, we are out of time. So just want to give a big thank you to all of our panelists and RETCON, and I will pass it back over to Patrika.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin, for moderating. And thank you to all of our amazing panelists. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I know the audience is giving you a huge virtual round of applause. Thank you all for joining us today. All right, for the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. And along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.
Thank you.